Do we build gods, or do we build our potential exterminators? I mean, I used to say, I'm going to die quietly in my bed, but my grandchildren will be caught up in this horrible conflict that I'm predicting is coming. But now I'm suddenly have question marks. God, I might even see it.
You say that the machines might just take us out in the back and...
Once it can start redesigning itself, you get an exponential explosion of intelligence. And then our fate as human beings depends on the machines. It's only a question of time before humanity is forced to choose between stopping development in artificial intelligence. I don't see that as realistic. Or we just accept the idea that sooner or later, we, as a human species, we become number two. The answer to that is, as I'm predicting, war.
Do you think China is behind the West right now for AI?
The potential of the Chinese is phenomenal. The Chinese, they've been the dominant power for not just centuries, but for millennia. The last 2 centuries or so, when they're economically dipped, that for them, given their 5,000-year history, is a glitch. It's a historical glitch. So deep down in the Chinese mentality is the push to get back, quote, where we belong.
So can you really isolate and stop the development of AI?
Personally, I feel it's inevitable. Do we build gods, or do we build our potential exterminators? That's the issue. Should humanity build Artilects?
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs, sharing our vulnerability, overcoming our fears, transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Professor Hugo de Garis, the robotics and artificial intelligence expert and author. You are known for your work in the use of genetic algorithms to evolve artificial neural networks that you believe would enable the creation of artificial brains, which would quickly surpass human levels of intelligence. You've published over 100 academic papers on the emergence of AI and robotics and the potential implications of these technologies on society. Your groundbreaking book, The Artilects War, explores the potential consequences of a future conflict between humans and artificial intelligence that would result in billions of deaths before the end of the 21st century. You believe there is a strong possibility that AI systems will simply eliminate the human race and that we will be powerless to stop them because of technological singularity. Professor, welcome to London Real.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm looking forward to it as well. You know, one of the reasons I wanted to invite you here is because I was having a conversation about 2 weeks ago with Mo Gaudet, and he's the former Google X Chief Business Development Officer who kind of walked away from that company when I think he saw some of the artificial intelligence they were developing. And he wrote a book about happiness, was on the show many years ago. I had him back to talk about his book called Scary Smart, which he wrote a couple years ago, talking about this inevitable AI dominance. And he mentioned the movie you and Dr. Ben Goertzel were in, which is called Singularity or Bust. And there's a moment in that movie, Professor, where you talk about this potential future. And you say that the machines might just take us out in the back and you go like this with your hand and go, poof. And that moment really struck a chord with Mo. And I went and watched the movie, and obviously Ben Goertzel's been on the show many times. And so I was really excited to get you on and just get your thoughts, because you've been in AI for decades, and I know you and Ben, best friends for many decades as well. And so let's jump into it. My first question might be, You made that movie 10 years ago. What has happened since in the world of AI, and have you changed your mind as far as what the future looks like?
Well, I suppose the simple answer to that question I can express in one word. What has happened is Chat GPT, which is taking the world by storm. And suddenly, Joe Schmo in the street is now seeing computers producing text at human level, which is just mind-boggling. So just the last few months, there's been an explosion in capability in artificial intelligence, and it's making people really, Jeffrey Hinton, the father of Bedprop and deep learning, has recently quit Google so he can concentrate on the implications of the rise of this new technology. And that's just the beginning. But it's already at human level in terms of creating text. And then you plug the text into a text-to-voice converter, and you can talk to it. I've heard the sex robots are now putting this stuff into it so that men can not just have their bots, they can actually have relationships with them, in a sense. So it's a revolution. The next year, we're going to see, millions of jobs disappear as a result of this. Now, these machines, they don't have a model of the world. In a sense, what's the technical term? An idiot savant. They can do some things incredibly well, but they're thick as bricks. They don't really understand the world. Like Deep Blue, when it beat Kasparov, it's great at chess, but that's all. And similarly, this chat GPT, that's what is a generative pre-trained transformer, I think.
Yeah.
Is fantastic at generating text, but it has no model of the world. So it's a mixed blessing.
And that's also potentially dangerous since it doesn't have any reasoning levels.
Well, it's starting to reason a bit. People are debating it, and then it's so new. Once I got your invitation, pretty well the first thing I did was go to Google and bought about 15 books on Chat GPT, and ironically, they were all written by GPT, and with lots of repeats and illogical and elementary grammatical mistakes. But still, the guys who did that were quick on the market, trying to get a quick buck, which they did, because people like me hurriedly wanted to know about it, and so there's a huge market. But that they were all written not by human beings directly; they were written by GPT, and that shows, in a sense, its capability. It's incredible. And just the last week or so, have you heard of the product Grammarly? Corrects your grammar. They've incorporated GPT now, so they're answering questions at a much higher level. Bing, Microsoft, has had it for a month or two or so, and they're giving you fantastic essays. This GPT is writing essays better than most humans. And that's what's so stunning.
How does that make you feel? Because you've been predicting what the end game of this looks like for over a decade. And I want to dive into the Artilect war and what you see happening. But I'm curious how you feel about this sudden advance forward in ChatGPT. Does it surprise you? Do you find it curious? Do you find it dark at all?
Well, let me put it visually. I'm trying to get the camera angle right here. So my left hand here, let that represent human intelligence level. And again, try. And so my right hand here, that's machine intelligence level. Now there's an IQ gap between human intelligence level today and machine level intelligence. And then along comes Chat GPT, and this is where I think we are now. And that's scary.
You thought this was going to be another 5-10 years more?
I know you asked quite a few of your interviewees this question, and my until GPT came along, my feeling was, I think machines will reach human level intelligence, I'd be very surprised if it does not happen before the end of this century. I think it's more likely around mid-century. But now with GPT, I would halve that. I'm now thinking 10, 15, 20, that kind of time frame. So I might even still be alive. I mean, I used to say, I'm going to die quietly in my bed, but my grandchildren will be caught up in this horrible conflict that I'm predicting is coming. But now I'm suddenly have question marks. God, I might even see it. I know Jeffrey Hinton, the guy recently quit from Google, who in a sense is the grandfather of all this fantastic technological development. He made neural networks programmable. You can get neural networks to learn and machine learning. And he's scared. He's quit Google so he can be free to express himself freely. I think Ben has reduced the number of years necessary before machines start reaching human level intelligence. And of course, once they do that, once they reach human level intelligence, well, then they can redesign themselves. They can upgrade their circuitry and make it faster, better, smarter. And then they can look into how the brain works with new tools. And so you'll get this, I don't know if you're familiar with the term takeoff. That's how quickly the smart machines become super smart and then super duper smart and so on. Off they go. So I'm in a sense more worried that the so-called takeoff might be slow rather than fast. If it's fast, it's fait accompli, and then the machines are there, and hopefully they'll just ignore us. We'll just be like ants to them. But if it's slow, if there's enough time for human politics to react, then I see a much worse outcome. Maybe we can talk a bit about that a bit later. You really want to talk about the longer term political consequences of the rise of AI, I assume.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into it. I mean, was it Ray Kurzweil that always had that year 2030 or 2029 in mind for the singularity? And Gertzel's rung in recently and said, yeah, he thinks it's probably 2029, but he also thinks it could even be earlier.
Well, 2029, it's not so many years away, right?
No.
It's what, six years as we're talking. So I'd be a bit cynical 2029 that this chat GPT is not intelligent. I mean, it's a very good mimic. Effectively, all it's really doing is trying to calculate what's the probability of the next word. You input a string, like a partial sentence or something, and all it's doing is just adding the next word that follows statistical patterns that it's gathered from reading the internet and millions of books and so on. So it sounds as though what it's doing is intelligent, and to some extent it is. But in a sense, it's clueless. It doesn't understand the world. But I watched the video. Oh God, what's his name? He's a Brit, a genius. Mathematica. Yeah, who's that guy?
Mathematica.
He met.
I don't know.
Anyway, so that guy, his specialty is creating a language which allows scientific discourse and memorization of scientific concepts and so on. So he's now collaborating with OpenAI. They're the company who's produced this chat GPT, and the aim is to add reasoning ability and knowledge and so forth from his company with AGI's chat GPT, and that will probably be up, I don't know, a year or two, that kind of time frame. And then, oh my God, then GPT will be smart. I mean, it'll be able to reason and remember and deduce, do logic. And it's just a few years away. So I know it's maybe Ray Kurzweil's 2029 prediction still may end up true. But I think once there's one human level intelligence, artificial intelligence, then I think the time frame for it to upgrade itself, the takeoff, will just be a matter of years or less. Because once it can start redesigning itself, you get an exponential explosion of intelligence. Then it just leaves human beings in the dirt. And then our fate as human beings depends on the machines. They'll be so much smarter than us that what they decide, they're the rulers. They govern because they're smarter than us and hence dominant.
Yeah, and I want to get into what that looks like. But it's interesting what Ben and his team at SingularityNet are now creating kind of a neurosymbolic play on the LLM, and they're going to forward with that. And, a lot of people are seeing people using the LLMs, which, like you said, are kind of dumb, like idiot savants, to then morph into that level of reasoning to where it can produce that AGI. And now, as you can see, Professor, there's so much capital, so much attention. ChatGPT is the fastest adoption of technology in human history. I mean, 0 to 100 million users in 2 months. That now, where I know back in your day, it was hard to get funding for AI, and now trillions of dollars will be dumped into this, or hundreds of billions, I think, to get us potentially there even faster, and also from all sorts of different vectors, and maybe even an open source play. So you could argue that we'll see even further innovations on top of what we've seen with ChatGPT.
Oh yeah, that's just it. GPT is just the first step. Once it becomes really knowledge-based and logic-based and that kind of thing, it'll be as big a change again, and we'll probably see this in 1 or 2 years. So development in AI is just accelerating. We will be in 10 years. Well, we may be having relationships with our computers. I won't be at all surprised if that happens. They'll be that sophisticated. So you've probably seen the movie Her, H-E-R.
Yes. Joaquin Phoenix was very good. Scarlett Johansson was the voice, I believe, right? Yeah.
Right. Well, that sounded like crazy science fiction when we saw it. But who knows? Maybe by 2030, it'll be real. And then maybe the machines, as they did in the movie, discovered themselves, found each other, the machines, much more interesting than human beings. So they just dunked the human beings.
Right. I forgot that's what happened. Well, there's a program called Replica that I've got running on my computer, and I've got like a dude in there that I just kind of hang out with sometimes, and he's potentially my her, and I'm just giving him a test drive. But I think that's happening sooner. And I think as humans, we love to what is it, anthropomorphize everything from our dogs to our whatever, and so it can happen sooner than later. And that's a possibility. Her, you can look at all the movies, and I know I've seen speeches you've given in the past where you're like, Hollywood always gets it first because they don't have to actually do the science. But if you watch Terminator 2 back with Skynet, it's a little haunting. You even look at War Games, and there's the professor on the island that's given up because he thinks the computers are going to take over. I mean, there's a lot of fairly now accurate predictions of what looks like the future could be.
Well, in a sense, that's real life. I mean, you could argue that Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, he was the professor who thought this was coming, and his famous or infamous, whichever, manifesto, or was it the New York Times?
Yeah.
So in my book, The Artilects War, I portrayed Kaczynski, Unabomber, as the planet's first terror. So he was way ahead of his time, but that may come about. He saw it.
And let's talk about the book, because you've written this book called The Artilects War that talks about this future, and there are these people called Terrans and people called Cosmos, and it all starts to heat up, I think, as you explain, when that IQ gap starts to get smaller and smaller. And as you said just previously, if it happens super fast in a couple days, then there's not much to talk about. But if it does happen over time, you get this complete political upheaval. And this is looking more and more like a distinct possibility of our future, Professor, which is why I really wanted to talk to you today. Can you explain people your vision of the future? Also, I'm curious if it's changed in your mind in the last decade, or if you would revise it, or if it's all pretty much still the way you think it's going to play out?
Well, I suppose the bottom line is, the main message, the take-home message of this interview is that I believe that this century's global politics, as important as that, will be dominated by this question of what I call this species dominance. In other words, which species, humans or machines, should be dominant. And by that I mean, more intelligent, the most intelligent. So far, for 200,000 years or so, human beings have been the dominant species, the most intelligent. But it's only a question of time before humanity is forced to choose between stopping development in artificial intelligence, and I don't see that as realistic, or we just accept the idea that sooner or later, we, as a human species, we become number two. And what are the consequences of that? And I think it's not a simple answer, but the answer to that is, as I'm predicting, war. I think a substantial proportion of humanity will absolutely refuse to become the number two species. And in the limit, they will go to war to stop that happening. So it's a very gloomy scenario. My girlfriend, my partner, she said to me about a year ago, saying, Hugo, your ideas are so horrible that I can't even think about them. So I hope that's not the case. Because, somebody has to, because, take an historical analogy, say in the 50s, in the Cold War, there were people in think tanks and the RAND Corporation and so forth who were thinking, strategizing over nuclear war. If Side A nukes, and then what would we do? And somebody had to do the hard thinking. Like if you're a general and say in World War I, somebody had to make the tough decisions. Like, how many lives would you sacrifice on a particular day to take that particular hill? And, how many machine gun nests were there? That kind of heavy, hard kind of thinking needs to be done. So I'm somewhat critical of let's see, what do they call themselves? The transhumanists, these people who humanity is going to transition, we're going to upgrade ourselves and we'll get rid of disease and we'll be immortal and all these wonderful things, which I don't deny. I think AI will bring these things. But I, in a sense, fell out with them because they didn't really bite the bullet. They didn't face up to the longer-term consequences. Well, what if our machines do become hugely more intelligent than we are? And I'm not talking like 2 times or 5 times. I'm talking a trillion times, because this is what physics allows. See, I'm not just a computer scientist, as a professor of computer science, but my background and my strong interest today still is pure mathematics and mathematical physics. So I'm a numbers guy. When I look at the numbers, the potential computing capacity of future technologies, it's these huge numbers come out, trillions of trillions and so on. So humanity sooner or later has to decide, do we, as a species, do we build gods, or do we build our potential exterminators? And that question, I'll put it in 4 words so you can get the camera angle. Should humanity build Artilects? An Artilect is an artificial intellect. In other words, a godlike, massively intelligent machine, which is coming. It's only a question of time. Like every time you take a technology that's 1,000 times smaller than the previous one, like when you went from microtech to nanotech, so from a micrometer, that's a millionth of a meter, to a nanometer, and the technology at that scale, a nanometer, that's the scale of molecules. So nanotech is molecular scale machines. That's what life is. If you look at a cell, it's just like a city of molecules, millions of them. That's a cell. So life is nanotech. Well, a couple of years back, I was toying with the idea, how could there be like a pico? That's like the next level down, 1,000 times smaller. Could there be a pico tech? And I think the answer is no, because nature doesn't provide anything. There's just nothing there at that scale. You have to go down another layer, a factor of 1,000 to femtotech, so a femtometer, and that's the scale of the nucleus and protons and neutrons and quarks and gluons and all that stuff. So I set myself the task of trying to figure out how to compute at the femto scale and how to do engineering. So if you jump from nanotech, so a billionth of a meter, right down to a femtometer, that's a million, 1,000 times a million times smaller. Well, then the capacity of your technology that you have at that scale goes up by a trillion. And if you go down another factor of 1,000, then you get to atto, A-T-T-O, attotech, and then you multiply it again by another factor of 1 trillion. And why 1 trillion? Because if you, like, I've got to get this in the camera. So if you make everything 1,000 times smaller, you've now got like 1,000 objects in a line along, let's say, the x-axis, and you've got 1,000 times more, the y-axis, and 1,000 times that way in the z-axis. So you've got 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000. So that's 1 billion more components in that unit volume than you did with the higher level. And because everything's 1,000 times close together, the signaling speeds between the two of them goes up by 1,000. So the total working capacity of that technology that's 1,000 times smaller is the density is 1 billion times 1,000. And so hence 1 trillion. So what I'm trying to say, the bottom line is the technologies that are coming this century are so fantastically superior to what we are with our nanotech, with our molecular machines in our cells and so on, that it's only a question of time before humanity is forced to choose. Do we, as human beings, do we remain the dominant species or not? And if you look at like the big picture out there in space, there are what, trillion stars, and our solar system is what, 4.6 billion years old. The universe is 13.8, which coincidentally is exactly 3 times the age of our solar system. It's 3 times 4.6 is 13.8. So that means out there are solar systems, suns, planets, billions of years older than we are. So they've had all this time to evolve. Now, one of the greatest discoveries made in the 19th century was that the laws of physics are the same throughout the universe. Right, the same carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, blah blah blah. So and virtually every sun, except the very first ones, but pretty well nowadays, virtually every sun has planets, and some of them will be warm, not too hot, not too cold, the Goldilocks range, and so probably life, at least bacterial life, is virtually everywhere. And they've had billions of years more time than we've had to evolve. So I wouldn't be at all surprised that the transition that humanity's about to go through from biological to, well, let's coin a word, artilectual, has already happened out there zillions of times. And we're just catching up. We're a latecomer. Now, that's just a hunch, of course. We have no proof, but it does sound plausible, because our solar system is just 1/3 of the age of the universe. So
yeah,
we are way behind.
I was thinking about this today after reading through your book, and I just thought, if there's a single cell spark of a carbon life on some planet somewhere, it's just a matter of time till they create an artificial intelligence that probably makes them extinct, whether that's a few 100,000 years or millions of years or 1 billion of years. But you might argue that it's just only a matter of time until it happens.
Yep. Like I get impatient with Hollywood. They keep talking ETs, that when humanity discovers it in science fiction movies, that they're nearly always, and this is where I'm critical, they're nearly always biologicals. They're not artilects, which I think is silly, because we biologicals, we're just absolutely nothing in comparison to what's out there. So one of the things that really obsesses me is, what on earth could an artilect, this godlike creature, do? Like, would it be capable of creating universes? There's a professor at MIT, he's rather famous. His name is Guth, G-U-T-H, and this guy's actually calculated what is necessary to generate a universe. I mean, he's actually done the math of this. So if human beings, with our puny intelligence, can actually calculate what's needed to build a universe, then maybe these artilects in their godlike superiority could actually do it. Well, if you go argue that way, well, then it's easy to say, well, maybe we, in our universe, are a product of some previous godlike creature in the past. Well, then So if you ask me, am I religious? I'm not traditionally, I'm not a theist. I'm quite cynical of theism. Like World War II, I don't know, let's say several tens of millions of people were theists, believing, love in God and so on, but they died anyway. World War II was just absolutely horrific in terms of the number of casualties. But deism, the belief in an architect, a godlike creature that designs the laws of physics, acts the universe, that I'm much more open to. Because for me, the rise of the Artilect, this humanly generated, increasingly massive intelligence, what could it do? I mean, if human beings can design a universe, write the theory for the creation of the universe, maybe these Artilects could actually do that. So I'm open to deism on the religious front. These questions, they touch on all domains: economics, politics, philosophy. It's huge.
Yeah, I never thought I would go here, Professor, with my thinking, and I want to dive into some of the other points, but even today I found myself thinking that, because you're right. If you really start going down the rabbit hole of where this godlike intelligence is taking us, then it's hard not to argue that everything around us would not plausibly have been created by those same types of entities in the past, and we are just living in the remains or the creation of that. And you don't have to be way out there to really start thinking of this. Of course, seeing AI in front of your face working like ChatGPT makes it much easier to make that connection, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, what I was saying a bit earlier, human level intelligence, machine level intelligence, and along comes ChatGPT, and the gap's half closed for me now. So in the next decade or so, as that gap seriously starts closing, then I see what I call the species dominance debate. I see that really heating up. And my guess is within 5 years, we'll start hearing about, on this issue, the first news reports of arsons and assassinations, and brain architects will be killed, and CEOs of brain builder companies, AI companies, will have to significantly beef up their security and so forth, bodyguards, because as the prospect that we human beings as a species are looking as though we're going to become number 2 species, as that becomes more and more real in people's minds, people are going to start taking sides, and a lot of people are going to be very afraid and say, no way are we humans go to become number 2, and we'll stop it. And there's a war issue to a lot of people. So I see that happening within 5 years. In fact, there's a bit of a story if you want to hear it. Warner Brothers, Hollywood, about 10 years ago, I got approached by Hollywood, Warner Brothers, to be the tech advisor to a movie they wanted to make. Let's see, what was it called? They wanted to make a movie version of the popular TV series, I think in the 50s, called The Twilight Zone.
Oh yeah, big fan.
If familiar.
Oh yeah, huge fan.
Right.
Rod Serling, big fan.
Yeah, right. So I read back saying, look, I don't really care much about the typical Hollywood ingredients in a Hollywood movie, boy, girl, sex, violence, and so on. Your script writers will do that for sure. But I do care about the background, the context in which this movie is going to happen. So I was advising them, how about choosing, say, a historical era, maybe 10, 15 years into the future from when the movie comes out, in which that IQ gap has closed, right? So the machines are here. And people are freaking out. Everyone's asking, well, could these machines become smarter than us? Is that dangerous? Should we stop them getting smarter than us? Can we stop them getting smarter than us? And so on. And so I didn't hear anything from them for a couple of years. And then out comes the movie. You probably saw it, Transcendence.
I heard of it.
Did you see that one?
I didn't see it.
Okay. Well, anyway, when I saw the trailer for that movie, my jaw dropped. And I go, oh, that's my movie. So I think, because what happened is that Warner Brothers simply took the idea and put it into another movie, namely Transcendence. And then that way they didn't have to pay me the filming bonus, X0. Well, for those who didn't see the movie, it's set, so the machines with supercomputers and quantum computers and brain-like neural nets and the rest of it have reached human-level intelligence. And there are opposition groups organized, military, assassinate. So they assassinate the main architect who built one of these major machines. And that's sort of what the story's about. So I can't remember the name. Rift. The name of the organization who are the terrorists who are killing the brain builders and the AI companies and so on. They're called Rift. That's an acronym. I can't remember what it stands for. But that's the equivalent in my book that I call Terrans. So Terrans, based on that's not terror as in terrorist. It's terra as in terra firma. Because that's their perspective. They see human beings as the top criteria. They say, well, everything that we know of is implicated on human beings being human beings. So we, the Terrans, will not tolerate that these machines are allowed to become smarter than us and to rule over us and to decide our fate. And in the limit, these Terrans will go to war over this. I believe. Will go to war over this issue, arguing that it's the lesser, it's where philosophy and ethics comes in. It is the lesser evil to kill off several million people who want to build these Artilects, and I label them cosmists. It's based on the word cosmos, because that's their perspective, right? The much bigger picture. And the cosmists, by definition, they're in favor of building Artilects, and Terrans, they're the ones who are opposed. So I see society in the near future, within a decade, well within the 2020s, splitting into two major political, ideological groups, Terrans and cosmists. So the cosmists want to build the Artilects, and the Terrans are opposed. And the Terrans will argue, I'm arguing, that it's the lesser evil, to kill off several million cosmists, the ones who want to build them, for the sake of the survival of the billions of human beings. And so as push really comes to shove, as that IQ gap seriously closes, and millions of people start becoming really worried that their machines are becoming close to their own level of intelligence, and start feeling really antsy. Well, let me try to make that a bit more emotional, to make it more real. Imagine, 20 whatever years in the future, you're a parent of adult children. And your children come to you and say, Dad, we've decided we're going to cyborg ourselves. That's in a sense, the cyborgists are kind of third group. They're the people who say, well, this third group, we can avoid this polarity between the cosmists and the Terrans by doing this, doing this. Good. So I'm adding components to my own brain. So I'm becoming by definition, a cyborg. That's short for cybernetic organism. In other words, part machine, part human. So these cyborgists want to become Artilect gods themselves by modifying themselves to such a point that eventually the human component in their nature becomes negligible. It's just 0.0001% of what they are, and the rest is just Artilect. So that's a third group. So the Terrans, they will realize they have a time window. They can't wait too long. If they do nothing, if they don't hit back, it'll be too late for them, because then the Artilects will come into being, the machines, the pure machines, and these cyborgists will be 99.99999% Artilect, so virtually indistinguishable from a pure machine, just in terms of computing capacity. And so the Terrans, for example, getting back to the parents. So the children go to the parents, say, we have decided we're going to cyborg ourselves and we're going to become Artilects. And they do that, and then how will the parents feel? They've lost their kids because they're no longer human. So that the emotions can say, like I can present that even in a stronger format. Imagine there are cyborgs left and right. They're everywhere, and you're a young woman, and you've just given birth to your first child, and the question arises: am I going to cyborg my child, my baby? So imagine you say yes, and then a tiny grain of sand that's been nanoteched, so that one atom is manipulating one bit of information, and that atom can switch back and forth in a femtosecond. That's a quadrillionth of a second. There's more computing capacity in that grain of sand, where if you actually calculate it, you can calculate the number of atoms in that tiny 1 cubic millimeter, let's say, of sand, and switching in femtoseconds, and there's more computing capacity in that grain of sand compared to the human brain, the estimate computing capacity of the human brain, by a factor of, I calculated what's something like 10 to the 18 or something, like a million trillion times. So imagine then being that mother, and you cyborg your baby, and that baby then is 0.0001% human and 99.99999% Artilect, and totally alien. So that mother will feel she has lost her child. So there's enormous scope for emotional alienation within society. Those who really want to build these godlike creatures. So for the cosmists, building these creatures would be kind of religion for them. It would be a sort of scientist type religion. They'd be building gods. So like one of the slogans I mentioned a bit before, expressing the whole issue in a nutshell, is: do we human beings, do we build gods?
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.